Picture a pirate captain standing on his quarterdeck, smoke pouring from his beard as hemp fuses burn like the fires of hell itself, transforming a mortal man into a demon from sailors' nightmares. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and get ready to explore the terrifying theatre of Blackbeard's burning beard. We'll discover how one pirate turned himself into a living nightmare to win battles without bloodshed, understand the psychology of fear that ruled the high seas, and learn what this masterpiece of intimidation reveals about reputation, showmanship, and the extraordinary power of terror in the golden age of piracy. The scene is November 1717, off the coast of Martinique. A French merchant vessel spots sails on the horizon, nothing unusual in these busy Caribbean waters, but as the ship draws closer, the crew's relief turns to horror. Flying from the approaching vessel's mainmast is a black flag bearing a skeleton holding an hourglass and a spear pointed at a bleeding heart. This is the Queen Anne's Revenge, and at her helm stands a figure from hell itself. Edward Teach, known to history as Blackbeard, has woven slow-burning fuses into his massive black beard. Smoke wreathes his face, his eyes gleam through the haze, and pistols cross his chest like the arms of death. The French crew doesn't fire a shot. They surrender immediately, preferring to live as poor men rather than die as rich corpses. To understand Blackbeard's theatrical genius, we must first grasp the brutal economics of piracy in the early 18th century. Pirates weren't the romantic rebels of modern fiction. They were businessmen operating in a high-risk, high-reward industry. Every battle meant potential profit loss through damaged goods, wounded crew members who couldn't work, and ships too damaged to sail. Dead merchants couldn't reveal where they'd hidden their most valuable cargo. Sunken vessels took their treasures to the ocean floor. The most successful pirates were those who could maximize profit while minimizing violence, and no one understood this equation better than Edward Teach. The man who would become history's most fearsome pirate likely began life in Bristol, England, around 1680. Edward Teach, or Thatch as it's sometimes spelled, grew up in a major port city where tales of maritime adventure mixed with the harsh realities of seafaring life. He probably went to sea young, as most sailors did, learning navigation, seamanship, and the brutal hierarchies of maritime labour. When the War of Spanish Succession erupted in 1701, Teach, like thousands of other English sailors, likely signed aboard a privateer, a legally sanctioned pirate hunting enemy ships for profit. Privateering was piracy with paperwork. Armed with a letter of marque from their government, privateers could attack enemy vessels, sell their cargo, and keep a portion of the profits. It was dangerous work, but potentially lucrative, and it taught sailors all the skills they'd need for piracy: navigation, gunnery, boarding tactics, and intimidation. When the war ended in 1714 with the Treaty of Utrecht, thousands of trained naval fighters suddenly found themselves unemployed. The Caribbean, with its busy shipping lanes and weak colonial governments, offered perfect hunting grounds for men with maritime skills and few legitimate options. Teach first appears in historical records as a crew member under Benjamin Hornigold, one of the early Republic of Pirates' founding fathers. Nassau, on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, had become a pirate haven, a place where rovers could repair ships, sell plunder, and enjoy their earnings without fear of arrest. Hornigold recognized Teach's abilities and gave him command of a captured sloop in 1716. The apprenticeship wouldn't last long. When Hornigold accepted a royal pardon in 1718, Teach was ready to strike out on his own, and he would soon eclipse his mentor's fame through a combination of strategic brilliance and theatrical innovation. The transformation from Edward Teach to Blackbeard represents one of history's most successful personal rebranding campaigns. Teach understood that in the piracy business, reputation was currency. A fearsome reputation meant easier victories, which meant more profit with less risk. He began cultivating an image designed to terrify, and every element was carefully calculated for maximum psychological impact. The beard itself became his trademark, a massive black tangle that reportedly reached his chest. In an era when most men were clean-shaven or kept neat, trimmed beards, Teach's wild facial hair marked him as outside civilized society. He braided it into small tails, sometimes tying them with ribbons, creating a Medusa-like effect. but the beard was just the canvas for his masterpiece of terror. The slow matches were the key to Blackbeard's demonic appearance. These were lengths of hemp rope soaked in saltpeter and lime water, designed to burn slowly and steadily. Cannon crews used them to ignite their guns' touch holes, and every ship carried supplies. Teach would weave these fuses into his beard and under the brim of his hat, lighting them before battle. The effect was calculated and devastating. Smoke wreathed his head, the acrid smell of burning hemp preceded him, and the glowing fuses created an otherworldly appearance in the dim light below decks or during night attacks. Contemporary accounts struggle to capture the terror this apparition inspired. One victim later testified that Blackbeard looked like a fury from hell, while another described him as a devil incarnate. The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming. Sailors who might have fought bravely against a normal pirate found their courage evaporating when faced with this smoking demon. The slow matches served no practical purpose. They didn't make Teach a better fighter or sailor. Their sole function was theatrical, and in this role they succeeded brilliantly. The rest of Blackbeard's appearance reinforced the demonic theme. He dressed entirely in black, from his boots to his hat, an expensive choice in an era when black dye was costly and prone to fading. Across his chest he wore a sling with 6 pistols, all primed and ready to fire. In battle he carried a cutlass in one hand and a pistol in the other. Some accounts claim he mixed gunpowder with his rum and set it alight before drinking, another piece of theatre designed to reinforce his supernatural image. The flag Blackbeard flew, his colours, added another layer to his campaign of terror. While the classic skull and crossbones is now universally associated with piracy, individual captains flew personalised flags designed to identify them and their intentions. Blackbeard's flag featured a skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear pointing at a bleeding heart in the other. The message was unmistakable. Time was running out, death was coming, and resistance would only bring pain. But Blackbeard's genius lay not just in creating a terrifying image, but in knowing how to deploy it strategically. He understood that fear, like any tool, loses its edge through overuse. He didn't sail around constantly wreathed in smoke. That would have been impractical and would have diminished the effect through familiarity. Instead, he lit his slow matches at carefully chosen moments for maximum psychological impact. The approach phase of an attack was crucial. Pirates typically flew false colours, flags of friendly nations, until they were close enough to prevent escape. Then they would raise their black flag, fire a warning shot, and demand surrender. This was the moment when Blackbeard would light his fuses and emerge on deck. The combination of the sudden flag change, the warning shot's boom, and the appearance of this smoking demon often secured surrender without further violence. Contemporary accounts provide numerous examples of Blackbeard's theatrical tactics in action. In one instance, he encountered a large merchant vessel that initially showed signs of resistance. The merchant captain had armed his crew and prepared to defend his cargo. Blackbeard ordered his men to prepare for battle, but before the first broadside, he appeared on deck with his fuses burning. He stood at the rail, visible to the merchant crew, and slowly drew one of his pistols. The psychological pressure was too much. The merchant captain struck his colours and surrendered without a shot being fired. This bloodless victory illustrates why Blackbeard's tactics were so effective from a business perspective. No one on either crew was injured, meaning no loss of labour. The merchant ship wasn't damaged, so it could be added to Blackbeard's fleet or sold. The cargo was intact and could be quickly transferred and sold. The merchant crew, grateful to be alive, cooperated in revealing where the most valuable items were hidden. Everyone except the cargo's owners benefited from the non-violent resolution. The economics of Blackbeard's operation were sophisticated. He commanded a flotilla that at its peak included 4 vessels and over 300 men. Maintaining this force required steady income from captured prizes. Every battle risked depleting his workforce and damaging his ships. By investing in theatrical intimidation, Blackbeard could maintain higher profit margins than pirates who relied on violence. His victims, traumatized but alive, spread stories that enhanced his reputation, making future victories even easier. The slow match technique became so associated with Blackbeard that other pirates began imitating it, though none matched his theatrical flair. This created an arms race of intimidation in the Caribbean, with pirates trying to outdo each other in fearsome appearances. Some grew their beards long and wild in imitation. Others adopted all black clothing or increased the number of visible weapons they carried. But Blackbeard remained the master of piratical terror. His image burned into the nightmares of sailors throughout the Atlantic world. The psychological principles underlying Blackbeard's success remain relevant today. He understood that fear of violence often exceeds the impact of violence itself. The human imagination, when properly stimulated, creates terrors far worse than reality. By presenting himself as supernatural, beyond the normal human categories of life and death, Blackbeard short-circuited rational decision-making in his victims. Faced with what appeared to be a demon, surrender seemed the only sane option. Blackbeard also grasped the importance of consistency in brand management. Every element of his appearance and behavior reinforced his terrifying image. He cultivated stories about his cruelty, though examination of historical records suggests he was less violent than many contemporary pirates. He supposedly shot his own crew members to maintain fear, though these stories may have been exaggerated or invented to enhance his reputation. He created an aura of unpredictability, making himself seem capable of anything. The slow matches served another psychological function beyond immediate intimidation. In the close quarters of ship-to-ship combat, the smoke would have been choking and disorienting. The acrid smell would trigger primal fear responses. The visual distortion created by smoke in dim lighting would make Blackbeard seem larger, more menacing, almost supernatural. These sensory elements worked together to create an overwhelming assault on his victim's courage. Interestingly, Blackbeard's theatrical approach may have made him a relatively humane pirate by the standards of his era. While he cultivated stories of cruelty, actual accounts of gratuitous violence are rare. He preferred psychological torture to physical harm, understanding that broken spirits were more useful than broken bodies. Crews that surrendered were typically treated well, robbed but not murdered, and often left with enough supplies to reach port. This merciful reputation, paradoxically, made surrender more attractive and thus made his theatrical intimidation more effective. The height of Blackbeard's career came in May 1718 when he blockaded Charleston, South Carolina, one of British America's busiest ports. For a week, his fleet stopped every ship entering or leaving the harbour, holding the entire city hostage. The audacity of the act was breathtaking. Here was a pirate openly challenging colonial authority, demonstrating that established governments couldn't protect their citizens or commerce. But even this dramatic action revealed Blackbeard's practical nature. His demand wasn't for gold or silver, but for medical supplies, specifically mercury and other medicines used to treat syphilis and other diseases common among sailors. When the city complied, he released his hostages unharmed and sailed away. The blockade enhanced his reputation while securing necessary supplies for his crew's health. It was piracy as performance art, with practical benefits. The Charleston blockade marked the apex of Blackbeard's power, but also the beginning of his end. Colonial authorities, humiliated by their impotence, increased pressure on pirates throughout the region. The British Navy deployed more ships to hunt pirates. The golden age of piracy was ending, and even Blackbeard's fearsome reputation couldn't protect him from changing times. In June 1718, Blackbeard appeared to recognize the shifting winds. He grounded the Queen Anne's Revenge on a sandbar near Beaufort, North Carolina, possibly deliberately, and accepted a royal pardon from Governor Charles Eden. For a brief period, he attempted to live as a law-abiding citizen, even marrying a local woman. But the lure of the sea and easy plunder proved too strong. By autumn, he had returned to piracy, operating from Ocracoke Island on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Governor Alexander Spotswood of Virginia, determined to end Blackbeard's career, organized a covert operation. He commissioned Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy to hunt down the pirate, offering a substantial reward. On November 22, 1718, Maynard's 2 sloops surprised Blackbeard's smaller force at Ocracoke. The battle that followed would become the stuff of legend. For the first and last time in his career, Blackbeard's theatrical intimidation failed him. Maynard's sailors were hardened Navy men, not easily frightened merchant crews. When Blackbeard appeared with his slow matches burning, they didn't flee in terror. They opened fire. The initial exchange was devastating. Blackbeard's cannons, loaded with small shots, swept Maynard's deck, killing or wounding nearly half his crew. For a moment it seemed the pirate might triumph once more. But Maynard had a trick of his own. He ordered his surviving men below decks, making his sloop appear abandoned. When Blackbeard's men boarded, expecting easy plunder, Maynard's sailors erupted from below in a surprise counterattack. The battle devolved into vicious hand-to-hand combat on the blood-slicked deck. Blackbeard fought with desperate fury. Even without his theatrical elements, he was a formidable warrior. Contemporary accounts claim he sustained 5 gunshot wounds and 20 sword cuts before finally falling. In death, he became even more legendary than in life. Maynard ordered his head severed and hung from his sloop's bowsprit as proof of victory. Legend claims Blackbeard's headless body swam 3 times around the ship before sinking, a final piece of supernatural theatre. The immediate aftermath of Blackbeard's death saw an explosion of myth-making. Newspapers throughout the colonies published breathless accounts of the battle, each adding new dramatic details. The slow matches featured prominently in every telling, sometimes multiplied into dozens of fuses, creating a halo of fire around the pirate's head. His final battle became a set piece of heroism versus villainy, with Lieutenant Maynard cast as civilization's champion against barbarism, but the mythologizing served multiple purposes. Colonial authorities needed to demonstrate that piracy didn't pay, that even the most fearsome pirates could be brought to justice. Maynard needed to justify the exceptional violence of the encounter and his decision to display Blackbeard's severed head. The public wanted dramatic stories of good triumphing over evil. Everyone had reasons to embellish Blackbeard's demonic nature, and the slow matches provided the perfect visual symbol of his otherworldly evil. The immediate impact of Blackbeard's death on piracy was significant. Many pirates, seeing that even Blackbeard couldn't escape justice, accepted pardons and attempted to integrate into legitimate society. Others fled to more remote waters. The Caribbean's pirate republic began its final collapse. Within a few years, the golden age of piracy would be over, ended by increased naval patrols, better armed merchants, and the execution of most remaining pirate leaders. But Blackbeard's influence on pirate imagery proved more enduring than any of his contemporaries could have imagined. The image of the fearsome pirate with the burning beard became the template for fictional pirates. When Robert Louis Stevenson created Long John Silver in Treasure Island, 1883, he drew on Blackbeard's theatrical menace. When Disney began creating pirate attractions and films, Blackbeard's visual elements, the wild beard, the multiple pistols, the intimidating presence, became standard pirate iconography. The slow matches, in particular, captured imaginations. They represented the perfect fusion of practical object and theatrical prop, transforming a simple tool into an instrument of terror. Modern depictions of Blackbeard almost always include the burning fuses, sometimes exaggerated into a corona of fire that would have been practically impossible. The image has become so iconic that it's difficult to imagine Blackbeard without his signature smoking beard. This cultural persistence reveals something important about the power of theatrical intimidation. Blackbeard understood that humans are storytelling creatures, that we're more influenced by narrative and image than by facts and statistics. His slow matches created an unforgettable image that transcended his historical moment. 3 centuries later, we still remember the pirate with the burning beard, while many of his more successful but less theatrical contemporaries are forgotten. The principle behind Blackbeard's tactics, using theatre and reputation to achieve practical goals, remains relevant in many fields. Modern military forces use shock and awe tactics that echo Blackbeard's psychological warfare. Businesses invest heavily in brand image, understanding that perception often matters more than reality. Politicians craft personas designed to inspire or intimidate. The tools have changed, but the underlying psychology remains constant. Blackbeard's story also illustrates the double-edged nature of fearsome reputations. His theatrical intimidation made him successful, but it also made him a priority target for authorities. Lesser-known pirates could operate in relative obscurity, but Blackbeard's fame meant he could never truly disappear. His reputation preceded him everywhere, making it impossible to blend in or retire quietly. The very success of his brand became a trap he couldn't escape. The slow matches themselves deserve consideration as one of history's most successful props. They cost almost nothing. Hemp rope and saltpeter were common shipboard supplies. They required no special skills to create or use. Yet their impact was profound, transforming an ordinary pirate into a figure of supernatural dread. The return on investment in modern business terms was astronomical. Modern piracy, sadly still present in various parts of the world, has abandoned Blackbeard's theatrical approach in favour of speed and violence. Somali pirates racing toward tankers and speedboats have no time for slow matches or psychological warfare. They rely on RPGs and automatic weapons, tools that Blackbeard would have found crude and counterproductive. The economics have changed. Modern pirates seek ransom rather than cargo, but the loss of theatre makes contemporary piracy a purely criminal enterprise, lacking the dark romance that still clings to Golden Age pirates. The environmental impact of Blackbeard's career, while not a contemporary concern, bears mentioning. His theatrical approach, by minimising violence and ship damage, was inadvertently more sustainable than pirates who sank ships or destroyed cargo. The ships he captured often continued sailing, just under new ownership. The goods he stole re-entered commerce through colonial markets. Even his most dramatic acts, like the Charleston blockade, caused economic disruption rather than physical destruction. Blackbeard's relationship with colonial authorities reveals the complex politics of early 18th century America. Governor Eden of North Carolina probably knew Blackbeard had returned to piracy, but turned a blind eye in exchange for bribes. Governor Spotswood of Virginia acted partially from public duty, but also from personal interest. He wanted the reward money and glory. Pirates operated in the spaces between competing colonial jurisdictions, exploiting rivalries and corruption. Blackbeard's theatrical reputation gave him leverage in these negotiations, making him too dangerous to challenge directly. The role of the slow matches in naval combat deserves technical examination. In conventional use, slow matches were kept in covered buckets near cannons, providing a reliable ignition source that wouldn't be extinguished by wind or spray. Cannon crews needed steady, predictable burns to time their shots. Blackbeard's innovation was recognizing that the same properties that made slow matches useful in gunnery, visibility, reliability, distinctive smell, could serve psychological purposes. He transformed a tool of war into a tool of terror. The gender dynamics of Blackbeard's era shaped his tactics in subtle ways. Ships were exclusively male spaces, and pirate crews even more so. The hyper-masculine environment valued displays of courage and feared accusations of cowardice. Blackbeard's demonic appearance challenged conventional masculinity. Surrender to such a figure carried less shame than surrender to an ordinary man. His theatrical excess provided psychological cover for those who chose life over heroic death. The medical knowledge of Blackbeard's time influenced perceptions of his appearance. Many sailors believed in supernatural forces, sea monsters, and divine intervention. Mental illness was poorly understood and often attributed to possession. Blackbeard's smoking visage triggered these fears, placing him outside normal human categories. To superstitious sailors, he might literally have appeared demonic rather than theatrical. This gap between modern understanding and historical perception complicates our interpretation of contemporary accounts. Primary sources about Blackbeard pose significant challenges for historians. Most were written by his enemies or victims, with obvious biases. Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, the most detailed contemporary account, mixes fact with fiction in ways that are difficult to untangle. Newspaper reports sensationalized events to sell copies. Court records focus on crimes rather than personalities. Reconstructing the real Edward Teach from these fragmentary and biased sources requires careful historical detective work. The economic impact of Blackbeard's career extended beyond immediate plunder. Insurance rates for ships travelling Caribbean routes increased during his active period. Merchants hired additional guards or paid for naval escorts. Some shipping companies rerouted vessels to avoid his known hunting grounds. The total economic disruption far exceeded the value of goods he actually stole. His theatrical reputation multiplied his practical impact, making him a one-man economic warfare unit. Blackbeard's crew dynamics reveal interesting aspects of pirate society. Unlike naval vessels with strict hierarchies, pirate ships operated as rough democracies. Crews elected their captains and could depose them for cowardice or incompetence. Blackbeard's theatrical leadership style helped maintain his position. It's harder to challenge a demon than a man. The slow matches and other theatrical elements reinforced his authority without requiring excessive violence against his own men. The linguistic legacy of Blackbeard includes numerous phrases and concepts that entered maritime slang. Blackbeard's delight referred to successful intimidation without violence. Lighting the matches became code for preparing theatrical intimidation. His name itself became synonymous with piracy at its most dramatic. These linguistic fossils preserve cultural memory of his tactics long after their practical application ended. Archaeological investigations of the Queen Anne's Revenge wreck site have provided tangible connections to Blackbeard's world. Discovered in 1996 near Beaufort, North Carolina, the wreck has yielded cannons, anchors, and personal items. While no slow matches survived 3 centuries underwater, the ship's armament confirms Blackbeard's serious military capability. The wreck reminds us that behind the theatrical villain was a practical naval commander managing complex logistics. The religious context of Blackbeard's era influenced reactions to his appearance. This was still an age of faith when many believed in literal demons and divine intervention. Blackbeard's smoking visage blasphemously mimicked artistic depictions of hellfire and damnation. To devout Christians, his appearance wasn't just frightening, but sacrilegious. This religious horror added another layer to his intimidation tactics, making him an enemy of God as well as man. Comparative analysis with other pirates' intimidation tactics reveals Blackbeard's innovations. Bartholomew Roberts flew a flag showing himself standing on 2 skulls labelled ABH and AMH, a Barbadian's head and a Martinican's head, threatening specific nationalities. Edward Lowe tortured captives in grotesque ways to build his reputation, but none matched Blackbeard's combination of visual impact, theatrical timing, and psychological sophistication. He understood that suggestion was more powerful than demonstration. The seasonal patterns of Blackbeard's activities reflected Caribbean weather and trade routes. Hurricane season forced adjustments in hunting grounds. Trade wind patterns influenced merchant routes and thus pirate interception points. The slow matches would have been particularly effective in the calm, humid conditions common in summer, when smoke would hang in the air rather than dispersing quickly. Even his theatrical choices showed practical environmental awareness. Blackbeard's influence on later outlaws extended beyond piracy. Wild West gunfighters cultivated fearsome reputations to avoid actual shootouts. Prohibition-era gangsters used theatrical violence to control territory. Modern drug cartels employ grotesque displays to intimidate rivals. The principle Blackbeard pioneered, that reputation can be more powerful than reality, continues to influence criminal behavior. The technological limitations of Blackbeard's era made his tactics possible. In an age before photography or rapid communication, reputation spread through word of mouth and could be carefully cultivated. Today's instant global communication and ubiquitous cameras would make such theatrical deception difficult. Blackbeard benefited from an information environment where stories grew in the telling, and verification was nearly impossible. The psychological profile of Edward Teach remains frustratingly elusive. Was he a natural showman who found the perfect stage in piracy? A calculating businessman who recognized theatre's practical value? A sadist who enjoyed terrorizing victims? Or simply an opportunist making the best of available tools? The historical record provides evidence for all these interpretations. Like many historical figures, he was probably a complex mixture of motivations and impulses. The cultural appropriation of Blackbeard's image raises interesting questions. His transformation from historical criminal to beloved anti-hero reflects changing attitudes toward authority and rebellion. Theme park pirates with burning beards entertain children who would have been his victims. His image sells rum, appears on sports team logos, and decorates beach bars. This commercial sanitization of a genuinely terrifying figure shows how culture metabolizes and neutralizes its demons. As we conclude this exploration of Blackbeard's burning beard, several key insights emerge. First, theatrical intimidation can be more effective than actual violence. both tactically and strategically. Blackbeard understood that battles are often won in the mind before they're fought with weapons. His slow matches created a psychological advantage that translated into practical success. Second, reputation in the information age, whether the 18th century or today, can be carefully crafted and managed. Blackbeard's transformation from Edward Teach to the demon pirate shows how deliberately constructed personas can achieve real-world effects. He was an early master of what we now call personal branding, creating an image that served his professional needs. Third, the power of simple props to create lasting impressions remains remarkable. The slow matches cost virtually nothing, but created an image that has persisted for 3 centuries. In our age of special effects and digital manipulation, there's something refreshing about such analog theatricality. Blackbeard achieved more with burning rope than many modern films achieve with million-dollar budgets. Fourth, the economics of intimidation versus violence remain relevant across many fields. Blackbeard's business model, investing in fear to reduce operational costs, appears in various forms throughout modern society. From nuclear deterrence to corporate negotiations, the threat of force often accomplishes more than force itself. Finally, Blackbeard's story reminds us that history is as much about perception as reality. The pirate we remember, the demon with the burning beard, is partially historical figure and partially cultural creation. Each generation has reimagined Blackbeard to serve its own needs. From colonial authorities wanting to demonstrate law's triumph to modern entertainers seeking compelling characters. The slow matches that transformed Edward Teach into Blackbeard represent one of history's most successful special effects. With simple materials and brilliant timing, a mortal man made himself appear supernatural. He weaponized theatre, monetized fear, and created a brand that outlasted empires. In our modern world of careful image management and psychological operations, Blackbeard seems less like an ancient pirate and more like a pioneer who understood truths about human nature that remain relevant today. Whether we see him as villain or anti-hero, terrorist or businessman, theatrical genius or lucky opportunist, Blackbeard's burning beard continues to capture imaginations. The smoke has long since dispersed, the man has been dead for 3 centuries, but the image endures, a pirate wreathed in fire, standing on a quarterdeck, demonstrating that sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a cannon or cutlass, but the human imagination properly kindled. As you finish this journey through the golden age of piracy, consider what modern slow matches we might be overlooking. Simple tools that could be transformed through creativity into instruments of influence. Blackbeard's legacy isn't just about pirates or violence or historical curiosity. It's about the enduring power of performance, the economics of reputation, and the remarkable human ability to transform reality through theatrical imagination. The next time you see a pirate with a burning beard in popular culture, remember that you're witnessing the long shadow of one man's psychological warfare, a campaign so successful that it conquered not just ships, but centuries